Well, I was pretty lucky because my dad was really into kind of 70s and 60s country music. And my brother and sister were totally into, you know, from Steely Dan to Tigers of Pantang and everything in the middle. So it was a pretty varied sort of experience musically growing up. But as I got to be about 8 or 9, my sister was seeing a guy who worked at an old record store called Mr. Sound. And he would get promo copies of the records. Records are the vinyl things. I'm 47, so this is from the late 70s. And so when he got promo copies of a record, they had a little hole punched in the corner, as you probably know better than me. And records he didn't like, he would give to me. So I got the first Specials record that way. The Are We Not Men, We Are Devo record.
Yeah,
the first B-52s record, which really, all that stuff kind of opened my ears up to music. So the stuff I really kind of got into on my own without a lot of influence from my siblings was kind of that sort of post-punky new wave stuff.
At what age did you begin to play
guitar?
Yeah.
I got a guitar when I was 6, took lessons for a bit, and I hated it. I didn't want to play anymore, so I quit and I played drums. But then when I was in junior high school, I had some friends that were starting a band, and they already had a drummer. So
I had to do something else.
So I was like, well, let me pick up this guitar again. And I was 14, and I started playing it, and I couldn't put it down, and I still haven't. So I kind of caught the bug.
Chicks like guitars.
That's what they told me,
players.
but you know, I was too much of a nerdy introvert to. It's like girls second, guitar first.
What players really appealed to you when you were learning to play?
Well, my sister had a copy of Band of Gypsies, a Jimi Hendrix record, which is still one of my all-time favorite records. And that was kind of a big introduction to me of guitar being kind of at the forefront of a song. I really liked Ricky Wilson from the B-52s. Like, he kind of played that. He had this old Mosrite guitar with 2 low strings and 2 high strings, and got rid of the 2 middle ones. And he was this sort of mix of kind of Johnny Ramone and Henry Mancini. It was just neat. He had this really interesting way of playing, and just his tone and stuff was really cool. You know, I kind of went through the whole guitar geek phase. There's a guy named Eric Johnson who was like a really great technical guitar player that I saw in Austin City Limits, and I was like, I want to be that guy when I grow up. So I tried to play all the notes and do that. Then I realized I'm not very good at that. But yeah, I always liked guitar players, but it wasn't really the thing I enjoyed the most about music. But playing guitar came quite naturally. And I got really into blues players, you know, there was Stevie Ray Vaughan, but I really loved Jimmy Vaughan and the Fabulous Thunderbirds. But he has a thing. Like, he's this guitar player that has a character, and Jimi Hendrix, guitar player, has a character. And then, you know, I remember when I first heard the Unforgettable Fire, the U2 record, in junior high, I was like, this guy is different. Like, he's making these sounds with the guitar that I've never heard before. So I just tended to gravitate towards people that were doing something really, really unique. Well, I think a lot of good art that's come out of Calgary has always sort of been fueled by spite. Because we're not a cultural city. I mean, as much as we want to say we're a cultural city, we're really not.
Yeah.
You know, it's not.
Well, you still call us Cowtown. Right?
I know, so and that's still true. I mean, I don't know, but if you drive down Crowchild Trail, you're going to see more trucks than cars on any given day.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. But yeah, as far as, you know, real art, culture, and stuff, it's mostly, I think there's never really been this huge sort of monumental movement or scene, but there's always been sort of a reaction to what is sort of the societal norms in Calgary, which is very conservative, you know. It's a very nice place. There's nothing wrong with a nice place. I mean, I lived here for a reason. But I think a lot of the good art that's come from here has sort of been a response to that, or a desire to shake it up, or just a desire to experience something different. I mean, when I was a kid in high school, I remember reading my first Charles Bukowski book and thinking, well, this is a part of life I've never experienced growing up in Lake Bonavista. And it just seemed really interesting to me that with his writings, you could take something and describe this horrific sort of scenario with these people that are really on the edge of everything. Like, the things that were influencing him and that he was experiencing, that he was writing about, to me were really, really harsh, especially with my upbringing. But how he would find these beautiful moments in his writings, to me, that was like, it just made them stand out so much more. So you take this context of a really rough way of life, and then he would find these beautiful moments to write about, and it would be all that more poignant within that. I sort of had this hunger for trying to find, places like the first bar I ever went to was the National off of 9th Avenue.
Oh yeah,
to go see Cat Ranch.
Yeah, I love that place.
But it was like I wanted to be in a Bukowski type bar, being a teenage kid in suburban Calgary. And then that's sort of, I don't think I was alone in that, because my parents moved us here from the UK because Calgary was very pleasant and it was a very nice place to live, and it was kind of easy to live here. And the older I got, I just was hungry for something else, because it didn't feel like the intensity of my surroundings were matching the intensity and the passion I had for the guitar and for music.
Did you have that hunger to become famous, or,
no.
or was it just a...
No, I that was the part of the job that I always hated, and the fame and all that. Like when I worked with Jann, I mean, she was famous. I was her guitar player, so to keep it in perspective, if she didn't show up for a show and I was there, everyone would refund their tickets. If I didn't show up, people wouldn't even notice. But I enjoyed that. I like being in the background. It gives me more freedom to explore things, and I'm not as accountable to being a certain entity through the eyes of everybody, which is what a lot of sort of famous people are. I think.
So you don't care about the notoriety?
No. It's a byproduct of doing something well.
Right.
And if I'm fortunate enough to have periods of my life where people respect what I do and they want to learn about it and they want to come up and say thanks for the music and stuff. Well, that's extremely flattering and humbling, but it's never been a goal to achieve notoriety. The goal's always been just to get better at playing music and to try and put back into that pool of music that I drew from as a kid.
Right. Whatever
content I can give to it. So if I grew up listening to great guitar players and I really loved it, and then some kid comes to see me play in a bar and it inspires them to do something different, well, that's great. Then it feels like I'm contributing to that cycle of inspiration and perspiration that I got really heavily involved in as a kid.
Back in the day, who was the band here in Calgary that you thought was great?
I remember specifically for me, there was a fellow named Brent Kotchuk in town who, his younger brother Jordan was someone I grew up with. And Brent's a really great guitar player, and he plays in a band called the Dino Martinis. But I remember when I was 14, he was in a band called Rain for a Day, and they did this show up at UFC at the theater, and he hired me to be his guitar tech for the show. So I actually got to be on this show, like in a theater with all these visuals, and they were a pretty ambitious band. Like the whole thing was set up to be like an experience, not just a concert. And through that, I sort of got to see what you could do with a guitar in that context. And I've always been a huge fan of Brent's guitar playing. And he was very supportive when I was a kid as well. He was like, well, you're good at that. Keep doing it. And sometimes when you're a neurotic, geeky kid in the suburbs of Calgary, someone's saying, hey, man, no, don't put the guitar down. Keep doing it.
Yeah.
Those little things really help keep you going. But that was the first time I really experienced live music from not just the audience when I go out and watch it when they're playing, but also from behind the scenes and going to their rehearsals a little bit and going to the show and tuning up his guitars and making sure his stuff was set up and just being a part of all that. And it really was a special event and a really formative experience.
Do you really think that the new Alberta government is going to be as supportive of the arts as the NDP government was?
I don't know if government support of the arts is the be-all, end-all solution to creating great art. That being said, I will honestly say I voted NDP consistently because I think personally there's things about, you don't vote for your own needs, you vote for the greater good is how I try to look at it. And I feel that their policies and such were a lot more relevant and more in alignment to my value system than the Conservative government is. That being said, is a Conservative government maybe better for the arts industries? That's hard to say. I know that the film industry has had a lot of contact with the current Conservative government, and they're feeling optimistic about their policies in regards to the film industry. I've heard the new culture minister is really quite exceptional. I haven't met her, but I've heard nothing but good
fingers
things.
crossed, eh?
Yeah, but overall, I think relying on government to give you the ability to create art is always a little bit. I'm not always supportive of that. Like I was involved in a bit of a think tank for the Calgary Arts Development a couple of weeks ago, and some of the language that was used in the questions was, "What do we need to do to create, an art movement?" And I'm like, "But you don't create art movements. Like you create an environment where people have the freedom to be creative, and from that, a few people stand out and they bring everyone with you, and then they elevate everybody." Like if you look at the history of scenes in music, which is kind of a bullshit term because it's more retroactive than in the moment. It's like, oh yeah, there was such a great scene back then, but when you're in it, it's like it's not the same thing.
It's not happening when you're there.
No. But I think the idea of creating an environment where arts have the potential to thrive is one thing. To try and through government and through grants and everything, to just create a facility for people to put out records and create films and all that stuff. I don't know if that's always the way to go. She picked me up. I was living in an apartment building on 25th Avenue called the Avonlea. And she came and picked me up, and we drove to Edmonton for a rehearsal. And we talked on the phone briefly before that, but we just sat in the car for 2.5 hours. She drove. I sat in the passenger seat, and we just got to know each other. I was living in Montreal for a couple of years before I met her, and I actually bought her first record from a secondhand record store when I was living in Montreal, because I was like, this girl's from Calgary, I want to listen to it. And I loved the record. Like she had something really, really unique with how she sang, how she wrote songs, and there was an emotional sort of rawness to how she did things that I really felt a connection to. So it was neat.
She just invited you to be her guitar player?
No, it was.
How did that all come about?
Well, from what I remember, because it was a really long time ago, I was playing a jam at Morgan's. Because when I was in Montreal for a couple of years, and I was playing in this kind of punk rockabilly band called Jerry and the Sons of Rhythm Orchestra, and we toured all over North America.
That was a fun band. It was
$200 a week and all the pride you can eat. It was great.
All the pride you can eat.
But it was great. And Jerry's a terrific guy, great front man, and I moved back to Calgary, and I just took every gig I could. So if something was happening and they needed a guitar player, I was always like, I'll do it. I'll be there. I'll do whatever. And with that sort of attitude that I just wanted to sort of let people know that I was available for gigs and that I really wanted to play. And from that, I sort of got a bunch of gigs. And then, I was playing a jam, sitting in with somebody, I can't remember who, at Morgan's one Saturday. And her manager at the time, Neil McGonigal, was there. And then we talked briefly, and then he reached out and said, hey, like, would you want to audition for Jann's band? And I was like, absolutely. Tell me where to go and where to be, and I'll be there. I stopped working with her in, I think it was 2008 or 2009, because I just spent 15 years on the road, and it was too much. And then when we stopped working together, we didn't really talk for a long time, and then we sort of reconnected about 1.5 years ago, and we were working with a singer from Australia named Emma Hewitt, and we were doing some demos and some writing with her. And from there, she said, well, I'm doing this TV series, and I'd love for you to do the music. And when everyone says that, I'm always like, that, sure. When it happens, give me a call. And if I'm still at the front of your radar, give me a call. Yeah. Like, when people say, I'd really love you to do something, I'm like, once everything's signed and ready to go, then I'll get excited.
So you've learned a lot of lessons along the way, Russell.
Yeah. Take everything with a large bag of salt.
The business end of it.
Yeah. But, with Jann, there's never really been a shortage of personal integrity from her. So she's always been really good at following through and being true to things. And that, the older I get, the rarer that seems to be. Yeah, I think a big part of it is you're a facilitator. So someone has an idea of something, and they're in, or this, the seeds of an idea, or they see something further down the road from where they are, and they have sort of this image of it in their heads, and sometimes they don't know how to get from point A to point B. So a producer is someone that can put the pieces together that can help that person realize that vision. It's a collaborative job in a big way.
I would say so too.
And what I always tell artists is that this is your record, not mine. So you have to be 100% invested and happy with what we're doing. That doesn't mean there's going to be no challenges, because my job is also to make sure that you don't get numb to things that you're not great at. When you're working with a song, someone will have a part in it that actually really sucks, and nobody's told them it sucks yet. And you have to say, maybe that bridge isn't great. And they're like, I've always thought in the back of my head that it's kind of shitty, but nobody's ever told me.
Yeah. What to you makes for a good song?
I mean, there are certain songs that I think, there's just something relatively undeniable about the song. There's something compelling about it. If I hear something and then a couple days later it's still going through my head, I try and trust that.
Right.
And if it resonates and there's something about it that I can't really let go of, then I feel there's merit in that. If I listen to a song, everyone's really excited about it, and 6 hours later I can't remember it, like no matter how hard I try, maybe we're not doing something that's all that interesting.
Right.
But, a good song is, are you conveying a message in a way that the listener is getting inside it and feels connected to it? I always talk about, lyrics with artists where I really push them to put something really probably uncomfortably personal in there. Because a lot of people, their method of thinking is, well, if I'm going to write a pop song, I'm going to write something that feels kind of cliched and sort of universal, and I'm going to try and dumb it down for everybody. Where I'm like, you should really go in the opposite direction. Because I think if you do something that is almost a verbatim tale or an excerpt from an experience in your life, and you put that in the song, I guarantee you more people are going to relate to that specific thing, that it's triggered some kind of memory in them or some kind of experience that has been probably as effective or has affected them as much as it has the writer. And you should be brave and put that stuff in there.
So you're almost like you're being a confidant.
Yeah.
You're
songs are like diaries, whether they're real diaries or not, it isn't really relevant. But even if you can get inside a character to the degree that you can kind of apply some of your experiences in that different sort of scenario that's in the song, like those, that just makes it interesting. Yeah, like, I find Jason Isbell, who's one of my sort of favorite recent artists, especially that Southeastern record, is so well written lyrically because it's simple and it's concise and it's to the point, but I'm always surprised with what he's saying. And I really admire that. They say genius is that perfect blend of the obvious and the unexpected. And I think he's lyrically he's one of those guys that does that. And how the backdrop of the music serves that. And even the recordings, because the guy who records that stuff has a very particular sound about his recordings, that I get lost in that music, and it takes me out of whatever I'm experiencing and lets me kind of experience it through his lens. And I love when music does that.
Season 2 of Jann's show has a go-ahead, right?
Yeah, I hope they hire me back as I don't have a contract signed yet, so I hope they hire me back as the composer. But
well,
as far as I know,
you'd think that would be a given, right?
Well, no, I don't take anything for granted. We had a really good time working on season 1, and everything looks like I'll be working on season 2. There's a Calgary-based production of "We Will Rock You," that Queen musical.
Right.
So I'm musically directing that. So I'm putting it all together, and I've luckily hired a really amazing Alberta-centered band.
Is Jeff Perry involved in that?
Jeff is involved with that. Yeah. And so my summer's going to be spent building that up and getting that up and running. I've been writing a lot with Jann too, so we have a few new songs that are sort of kind of recorded and sitting in the can, and trying to figure out what we're going to do with those. Yes, I just did.
So you haven't been on vacation. Lots going on.
I haven't been on vacation in years.
When you do go on vacation, where do you go?
Well, Palm Springs is fun because there's nothing for me to do. I just have to relax. So I have to sit by the pool, drink a little too much, and then sleep a little too much. Top 5 favorite records.
Yeah.
Emmylou Harris Wrecking Ball.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Amazing production, great songs. You know, the Steve Earle song Goodbye, just their version of that is ridiculous.
Classic.
Yeah, it's great. Talk Talk, Spirit of Eden.
That was one of their more experimental.
I listened to that record every day for a year when I lived in Montreal. I would wake up every morning and I knew every note. I still do on that record.
So
it's one of my favorites. Yeah. John Coltrane, A Love Supreme. Because when I was a kid, I was really into playing jazz, and I didn't understand sort of the language of it. But the thing about that Coltrane record was I didn't feel I needed to. I didn't have to know what notes he was playing, and the intent was so strong that to me, it resonated with me the same way, a punk rock record would or something, because it had that intent that got me excited, and it wasn't about the notes or anything like that to me.
It was super intense.
Yeah. Jimi Hendrix, Band of Gypsies, still probably the best guitar record ever made. It's just special, and Buddy Miles is drumming, and there's just a thing about that record. And speaking of live records, Live at Leeds, the Who record.
The Who.
Because it's like the perfect rock and roll band, like on a perfect night. Like, it's so good. And the outtakes, like the deluxe version that has them doing Tommy as a big medley, so cool. The untitled Sigur Rós record, because to me that was sort of, I was always looking for a band that would do what Talk Talk was gonna do next, and I feel like Sigur Rós sort of took that and made it something different, but took sort of that idea and that motivation and made it still to this day one of my favorite records. I know I'm past 5, but you just have to bear with me.
Go down.
XTC, Skylarking.
Oh, wow, what a beautiful record.
Great songs in that record.
Actually, Andy Partridge is one of my favorite interviews.
Yeah, I bet.
It's just phenomenal.
Loved XTC as a kid. Radiohead, it's a mix between OK Computer and Kid A. So those 2 records made by this. The fact that they were made by the same band is pretty intriguing. But they're ridiculously influential records, I think.
Like for its time, OK Computer was just like, wow.
Yeah, it just cut through. It's like, what the hell is happening? And then Jeff Buckley, Grace. Because it's again, that is one of the best records ever made, in my opinion. There's something about the music and his voice and that combination of that fragility and that frailty with that intent and that big sound. It's still goosebump worthy and surprising. You know, you listen to it and he takes these risks, and it's just like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The Juno story. 2002 Junos in St. John's, Newfoundland. I had just gotten married and flown back from being married in Edinburgh, Scotland. And I went immediately to work with half of the Moffats, because 2 of them had a side project, and they had a studio in Brad Creek. So I came home and basically worked on their record for 3 months. The Junos happened during that, and Jann and I were nominated for Songwriter of the Year for a song called Thing for You that we wrote on this little kid's instrument called a Suzuki Omnichord. And it was on her Greatest Hits record, which was her first sort of Greatest Hits compilation. So we were up against Ron Sexsmith, Leonard Cohen, and somebody else. So I didn't really go to a lot of effort to go to the Junos because A, I was working with the Moffats, and B, I assumed we wouldn't win. And then Jann went, of course, and I got a phone call from Mike Bell, and he said, "Congratulations." And I said, "For what?" And he goes, "Well, you just won the Songwriter of the Year, Juno." And I was like, holy shit, I didn't go. Like, I messed up big time. And was absolutely thrilled. And I'm not really an awards guy. My mom likes the awards much more than me. But, obviously, it's a huge honor. And just to be nominated was a thrill. So Jann and I worked on a couple more records together. And one of them was a self-titled record in 2005. And that year I was nominated for Producer of the Year for that record, and Engineer of the Year for that record, as well as a single that we wrote for a band called Shadazy, and it was featured on the Desperate Housewives, that old TV show soundtrack. So that year it was in Halifax, and I thought, well, I'm nominated twice, I should go. So I did, and I lost both.
So if they ever get nominated again, I'm not going. No disrespect. It's just bad luck for me, apparently.